The sky was alive with the sound of crackling energy, streaks of blue light darting across the horizon. The once peaceful Earth was now a battleground. Cities that had stood for centuries were crumbling under a relentless barrage of alien fire. On the ground, panic gripped humanity as the first of the alien ships appeared in the sky. Massive dark shapes hovered over major cities, their weapons primed and ready. Captain Aria Collins stood in the middle of a ruined street, her eyes scanning the chaos around her. The once vibrant city of New York was now a burning shell, skyscrapers reduced to twisted metal and ash. The air smelled of smoke and fear. In the distance, she could hear the faint sounds of sirens, but they were quickly drowned out by the deafening explosions that shook the very ground beneath her boots. Her fingers gripped the control panel on her wrist, activating her cloaking device. It hummed softly, and for a moment, she vanished from sight. She needed to be invisible. Her team's only hope was to remain undetected by the alien forces. The world was not ready for this. Humanity had only just begun to venture into space when the first alien ships arrived. At first, people thought it was a sign of progress, of peace. The Council had been eager to join the Galactic Alliance, dreaming of a future where humans would stand side by side with other advanced species. But they were wrong. The aliens had no interest in peace. They only saw humans as a potential threat, a species too dangerous to be left unchecked. The first blast hit just moments after the ships appeared. A beam of intense energy struck the heart of New York, turning buildings to dust. Aria had been there at the time, watching in horror as the sky split open. What followed was chaos. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from a growing sense of helplessness. There was nothing they could do. The aliens were too advanced, their technology far beyond anything humanity had. The first wave of defense, a series of high-powered missiles launched from Earth's military bases, was nothing more than a pathetic attempt at stopping an unstoppable force. The missiles were intercepted mid-flight, disintegrated by the alien ship's advanced shields before they even had a chance to hit. The aliens were fast, far faster than anything humanity had faced before. They appeared out of nowhere, giant, menacing ships descending from the clouds, each one accompanied by smaller, faster drones that darted through the sky like angry wasps. It was impossible to track them, impossible to fight them. But humanity fought anyway. Aria was one of the lucky few who had survived the initial attack. As the explosions continued to rain down, she barked orders to her squad. They had been sent to the city for a simple mission: gather intel. But now, their mission had changed. It was no longer about information, it was about survival. Move, move, move. Aria shouted over the radio as her squad sprinted through the wreckage, ducking behind fallen debris and twisted metal. They had to get to the underground command center. That was their only chance of figuring out how to stop this madness. But even as they ran, Aria knew in her gut that they were too late. The aliens' first attack was just the beginning. She had seen the patterns, the same ships, the same drones. They had been preparing for this for a long time. This wasn't just a random invasion. It was a well-planned, calculated strike. The aliens had been waiting for humanity to make the wrong move, and now they were reaping the rewards. Aria's eyes narrowed as the familiar whine of enemy craft filled the air. A pair of alien drones zipped past, low to the ground, their glowing red eyes scanning for survivors. They were the size of small trucks, built for speed and destruction. "Get down," Aria hissed, and her team dropped to the ground, pressing themselves flat against the cracked pavement. The drones flew overhead, unaware of their presence. Aria's breathing was steady, but inside, her mind was racing. What had gone wrong? The humans were prepared. They had weapons. They had defenses, but nothing had prepared them for this. Nothing had prepared them for the alien speed, their precision, and their overwhelming firepower. The human military had always been confident in their technology, but now it was clear: humanity was outclassed. As the drones disappeared into the distance, Arya motioned for her squad to get moving again. They had to reach the command center, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation press down on her. The aliens had taken out Earth's major military defenses with ease, and now they were hunting survivors. Arya glanced back at the sky, where the alien ships loomed like dark gods of destruction. There was no doubt in her mind. Humanity was on the brink of extinction. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like if they could stop this, if they could win. But that thought was quickly crushed. This was no longer a fight for victory. It was a fight for survival. Earth had become a battlefield, and the humans who remained were nothing more than prey. "Captain," a voice crackled through her earpiece. It was Sergeant Anderson, one of her most trusted soldiers. "We've got a problem. There's a large group of drones heading straight for us. They've spotted our position." Arya cursed under her breath. There was no time to waste. She signaled for her team to move faster. But even as they ran, Arya knew they wouldn't make it. The drones were too fast, too many. The only way they could survive was by outsmarting them, by using their cloaking technology to slip past unnoticed. It was a slim chance, but it was all they had. They reached the underground entrance to the command center, but as they moved inside, the sound of approaching drones grew louder. Arya held her breath, listening. The drones were getting closer. She nodded to her team, signaling them to go silent. They couldn't risk being detected. Every movement counted. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them. The lights flickered. An explosion echoed through the building. The power grid was down. The aliens were attacking again, and this time, it wasn't just New York. It was the world. And in that moment, Captain Arya Collins knew one thing for sure. The war had only just begun. Humanity's fate rested in their hands. But the question was, how long could they survive against an enemy that was so much stronger, smarter, and faster than anything they had ever known? As the last of her team made it inside the underground base, the doors slammed shut behind them. The world outside was dark, but inside they had one last chance, one final opportunity to fight back. But Arya wasn't sure if it was enough. The underground command center was a far cry from the chaos of the surface. Beneath the shattered city, it was eerily quiet, the hum of computers and the low murmur of voices filling the air. The room was dimly lit by the pale glow of monitors, all showing similar images. Alien ships hovering above major cities, their weapons primed and ready to strike. The screens flickered occasionally, a reminder that the power grid was unstable, but they were still connected. For now, Captain Arya Collins sat at the central table, her eyes scanning the reports coming in from all over the world. The news was grim. Every major city had been hit, and humanity's military was on the brink of collapse. The first wave of alien attacks had been swift and brutal. Cities that had once been symbols of human achievement were now smoking ruins. The world had become a battlefield, and the humans who survived were scattered, fighting for their lives. Arya's mind raced as she tried to process everything. She had seen the devastation with her own eyes, felt the weight of the loss. But this was different. She couldn't just sit back and let Earth burn. Not while there was still a chance to fight back. She slammed her fist on the table, causing a few of the officers nearby to jump. "We can't just wait here and hope for a miracle," she said, her voice sharp. "We need to act, and we need to act fast." Lieutenant John Hayes, a seasoned officer and Arya's second-in-command, glanced up from his monitor. His face was pale, a result of the long hours and the growing pressure, but his eyes were steady. He had always been calm under fire, and right now, that was what they needed. But even he looked uncertain. "You're right, Captain," Hayes said slowly. "But what exactly do you propose we do? The aliens have already wiped out most of our defenses. Their ships, those drones, they're almost invincible. We're no match for them." Arya shook her head, not willing to accept defeat so easily. We don't have to fight them head-on. We need to outsmart them, not overpower them. We've got technology of our own, and I know there's a weakness in their system. We just need to find it. Where? Hayes asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. Where are we going to find something that can take down their ships? They have AI controlling everything. Their technology is far beyond ours. Arya clenched her fists, her mind turning. She had spent the last few hours studying the data coming in, trying to find any pattern, any hint of a flaw in the alien strategy. And then it hit her, a small detail buried in the reports, something she had missed earlier, but now seemed so obvious. The alien ships had been attacking Earth with surgical precision, but there was one thing they hadn't done. They hadn't wiped out all human resistance. There were still pockets of survivors, small groups hiding in cities or scattered across the countryside. And the drones, they were designed for one purpose: to destroy, not to hunt. They're not after us, Arya said suddenly, her voice a whisper of realization. They're after something else. Hayes frowned. What do you mean? They're looking for something, Arya continued, her eyes locked on the screen. They're not just here to destroy Earth. They're here to find something specific. A key. Something that we don't even know exists yet. That's why they're not just wiping us out completely. They need us alive for now. But if we can find out what they're after, we might be able to turn the tables. The room fell silent. The idea seemed almost impossible. How could the humans possibly know what the aliens were after? But Arya's gut told her they were onto something. The aliens had been planning this invasion for too long, and they wouldn't have come without a reason. She stood up, pacing in front of the table, as the officers around her exchanged nervous glances. We need to find that key, she said, her voice steady, filled with conviction. We need to get ahead of them, understand what they're searching for, and use that to our advantage. But where do we start? Asked Sergeant Leela Tran, a young officer who had been with the team since the beginning. We're stuck underground. The cities are destroyed. The aliens have air superiority. They'll spot us before we even get close to their mothership. Arya looked at her, her mind racing through every possible scenario. They were right. There was no easy way to get to the heart of the enemy's plans. But then a thought struck her. They didn't need to go straight to the mothership. They could start with the remnants of humanity's technology. If the aliens were after something specific, it was likely connected to something humans had created, maybe even something buried beneath their feet. We need to get to the old military sites, Arya said, her voice firm. The places where we tested the first space programs, the areas where we experimented with new technologies. If anyone knows what the aliens are looking for, it's us. We built some of the most advanced tech on the planet, and they might have their sights set on that. Hayes raised an eyebrow. You think they're after something we built? What could that possibly be? I don't know yet, Arya admitted, but I have a feeling it's connected to our early space programs. The aliens know our tech is dangerous, and they've been watching us for years. They wouldn't have come this far if they didn't know something we didn't. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of Arya's words sinking in. Then, slowly, Hayes nodded. I'll get the team ready. We'll head to the nearest military base and search for anything that might give us a clue. Arya's mind was already moving ahead, planning their next steps. We can't waste time. The longer we wait, the more ground we lose. We need to move fast, strike hard, and stay hidden. The aliens can't know we're coming for them. She turned to face the rest of the team. I know we've lost a lot, and I know the odds are stacked against us, but we're not done yet. This is our chance to fight back. And if we do this right, we might just have a chance to win. The team was already on their feet, preparing for the dangerous mission ahead. But Arya could see it in their eyes. Hope, determination, and a shared understanding that this was their last shot at survival. They weren't just fighting to save Earth anymore. They were fighting for the future. As the soldiers filed out of the command center, Arya took a deep breath, her mind already working through the next phase of the plan. The road ahead would be long and dangerous, but they were no longer running from the enemy. They were fighting back. Arya clenched her fists, her mind turning. She had spent the last few hours studying the data coming in, trying to find any pattern, any hint of a flaw in the alien strategy. And then it hit her, a small detail buried in the reports, something she had missed earlier, but now seemed so obvious. The alien ships had been attacking Earth with surgical precision, but there was one thing they hadn't done. They hadn't wiped out all human resistance. There were still pockets of survivors, small groups hiding in cities or scattered across the countryside. And the drones, they were designed for one purpose: to destroy, not to hunt. "They're not after us," Arya said suddenly, her voice a whisper of realization. "They're after something else." Hayes frowned. "What do you mean?" "They're looking for something," Arya continued, her eyes locked on the screen. "They're not just here to destroy Earth. They're here to find something specific. A key. Something that we don't even know exists yet. That's why they're not just wiping us out completely. They need us alive for now. But if we can find out what they're after, we might be able to turn the tables." The room fell silent. The idea seemed almost impossible. How could the humans possibly know what the aliens were after? But Arya's gut told her they were on to something. The aliens had been planning this invasion for too long, and they wouldn't have come without a reason. She stood up, pacing in front of the table as the officers around her exchanged nervous glances. "We need to find that key," she said, her voice steady, filled with conviction. "We need to get ahead of them, understand what they're searching for, and use that to our advantage." "But where do we start?" asked Sergeant Leela Tran, a young officer who had been with the team since the beginning. "We're stuck underground. The cities are destroyed. The aliens have air superiority. They'll spot us before we even get close to their mothership." Arya looked at her, her mind racing through every possible scenario. They were right. There was no easy way to get to the heart of the enemy's plans. But then a thought struck her. They didn't need to go straight to the mothership. They could start with the remnants of humanity's technology. If the aliens were after something specific, it was likely connected to something humans had created, maybe even something buried beneath their feet. "We need to get to the old military sites," Arya said, her voice firm. "The places where we tested the first space programs, the areas where we experimented with new technologies. If anyone knows what the aliens are looking for, it's us. We built some of the most advanced tech on the planet, and they might have their sights set on that." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "You think they're after something we built? What could that possibly be?" "I don't know yet," Arya admitted, "but I have a feeling it's connected to our early space programs. The aliens know our tech is dangerous, and they've been watching us for years. They wouldn't have come this far if they didn't know something we didn't." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of Arya's words sinking in. Then, slowly, Hayes nodded. "I'll get the team ready. We'll head to the nearest military base and search for anything that might give us a clue." Arya's mind was already moving ahead, planning their next steps. "We can't waste time. The longer we wait, the more ground we lose. We need to move fast, strike hard, and stay hidden. The aliens can't know we're coming for them." She turned to face the rest of the team. "I know we've lost a lot, and I know the odds are stacked against us. But we're not done yet. This is our chance to fight back. And if we do this right, we might just have a chance to win." The team was already on their feet, preparing for the dangerous mission ahead. But Arya could see it in their eyes: hope, determination, and a shared understanding that this was their last shot at survival. They weren't just fighting to save Earth anymore. They were fighting for the future. As the soldiers filed out of the command center, Arya took a deep breath, her mind already working through the next phase of the plan. The road ahead would be long and dangerous, But they were no longer running from the enemy. They were fighting back. It was time to take the fight to the aliens. The journey to the old military base was one of uncertainty and dread. As Aria and her team made their way through the ruined streets of what was once New York, the once bustling city was now an eerie graveyard. Skyscrapers that once touched the sky were now nothing more than skeletal remains of what they had been, half collapsed and burnt out from the initial attacks. The air was thick with smoke, and the constant sound of distant explosions echoed through the desolate streets. Every corner they turned, every shadow they passed, could hide an alien drone or worse, and the weight of that knowledge pressed heavily on their shoulders. Aria led the group, her mind focused entirely on the task ahead. She could feel the weight of responsibility on her. Each step they took closer to the base, the more urgent the mission felt. It wasn't just about finding the key to defeating the aliens anymore. It was about giving the survivors hope, something to fight for. The humans were scattered, afraid, and hopeless. The war had taken so much already, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to turn it around. As they reached the outskirts of the city, the ruins began to thin out, replaced by the overgrown remnants of the countryside. Fields, once full of life, were now barren, scorched by the alien bombardments. The roads they traveled on were cracked and crumbling, with no signs of human activity for miles. It was a quiet kind of desolation, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind, carrying the sounds of far-off explosions. "We need to stay sharp," Aria said quietly, motioning for the team to stay low. They were getting close. The military base wasn't far now, but with every passing second, the danger grew. The aliens were everywhere, flying drones, robotic scouts, and the massive ships still hovering above Earth's major cities, ready to unleash their deadly power. Sergeant Lila Tran, one of Aria's most dependable officers, kept her eyes on the horizon. She had been with the team since the beginning, always ready for action, but even she couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her. "Captain, do you really think there's something here? Something we can use against them?" Aria glanced back at her. "I don't know, Lila, but we have to try. We don't have any other choice." The base they were heading toward had once been one of humanity's most important sites, a place where cutting-edge technologies had been developed and tested. Now, it was a relic, long abandoned after humanity's focus shifted to the stars. The base was old, hidden deep in the wilderness, far away from the alien forces' radar. If there was any chance of finding something useful, it was here. As they approached the entrance to the base, Aria could feel a sense of urgency growing in her chest. The base was heavily guarded, not by alien forces, but by the remnants of Earth's military. After the initial onslaught, small groups of survivors had regrouped, fighting tooth and nail to protect what little remained of the planet. The base had become their sanctuary, and it was here that Aria hoped to find the answers they desperately needed. The team moved quietly, staying in the shadows as they neared the entrance. The security at the base was tight, but not insurmountable. The humans who had taken refuge there were well hidden, using old technology to stay off the aliens' radar. The trick was getting past the initial defenses without being detected. As they crept closer, Aria felt a pang of hope. It was strange. Hope was something she hadn't felt for a long time. But here, with her team by her side, the flickering possibility of survival seemed just within reach. Maybe the old military base wasn't just a relic of the past. Maybe it held the key to their future. "We're almost there," Aria whispered, motioning for the team to move in. They had to make it past the outer perimeter before the aliens could notice their presence. If they did, it would be over before it began. The security checkpoint was ahead. 2 guards stood watch, their eyes scanning the empty road. They were human, but battle-worn, just like Aria's team. Their faces were tired, their movements sluggish from exhaustion. They hadn't had any real rest in days. The aliens had made sure to keep them on edge, constantly attacking, constantly hunting. Aria raised a hand to signal her team to stop. She studied the guards for a moment, calculating the best course of action. "We can't take them head-on," she muttered under her breath. "We'll need to sneak past them." Lieutenant Hayes, who had been watching the guards as well, nodded. "I'll create a diversion. When they move to investigate, we slip through." Arya didn't hesitate. "Do it. Make it fast." Hayes moved into position, his movements silent, as always. Arya and the rest of the team took cover behind a nearby stack of crates, waiting for the distraction. They could hear the faintest sounds of the guards talking to each other, their voices low and cautious. And then, without warning, Hayes set off a flare in the distance, creating a brilliant flash of light that momentarily blinded the guards. "Go. Now." Arya hissed as the guards turned their attention toward the flare. Without waiting for a second thought, she and her team sprinted toward the entrance, hearts pounding in their chests. The sound of footsteps behind them echoed, but they didn't look back. They had no time to waste. The entrance was just ahead, an old steel door, rusted from years of neglect, but still standing strong. With one final burst of energy, Arya reached the door and slammed her hand against the security panel. It took a moment for the door to open, but then it slid open with a groan, revealing the dark, musty interior of the base. The team rushed inside, finding themselves in a narrow corridor. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in old maps and schematics. The base was a time capsule, a forgotten place where humanity's past had been stored away. But here, in the quiet, the team could sense it, the faintest glimmer of hope. Arya led the way down the hallway, her mind racing as she searched for something, anything that might give them an edge. They passed rooms filled with old technology, computers, machinery, and broken equipment. It all looked outdated, abandoned, and useless. But somewhere in this maze of forgotten corridors, there had to be something that could help them. And then, in the farthest corner of the base, they found it. A massive reinforced door stood at the end of a long hallway. The control panel next to it flickered, still powered by a generator deep within the base. Arya approached it carefully, her heart racing. This was it, the heart of the base. She keyed in the access code, praying it would still work. After a tense moment, the door rumbled open. Inside was a vast room, filled with rows of high-tech equipment. But it wasn't the machines that caught Arya's attention. It was a single console, sitting at the center of the room, surrounded by holographic maps and alien symbols. This was the place where the key to defeating the aliens might lie. Her breath caught in her throat. They had found it, something that could turn the tide of the war. It was small, just a piece of technology, but it was more than they had ever hoped for. A glimmer of hope. Arya smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. The war wasn't over. Not yet. But it would be soon. The days after they discovered the alien technology at the military base were both a blur and an eternity. Arya and her team had spent every waking moment analyzing the data they had retrieved, trying to unlock its secrets. The console had revealed valuable information, coordinates, alien communication patterns, and most importantly, a potential weapon capable of disrupting the aliens' advanced AI. But time was running out. Every second they spent in the base gave the aliens more opportunity to track them, and Arya knew they needed to act fast. The team had barely rested since their arrival, and the exhaustion was starting to show. Arya could see it in the faces of her soldiers, the weariness in their eyes, the way they moved more slowly as the days dragged on. But she also saw something else. Determination. The brief moment of hope that had ignited when they found the alien tech was still burning in their hearts. The mission was clear now. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were fighting back. The news from the outside world wasn't good. Alien patrols had been increasing in frequency, and the drones were getting more aggressive. Cities that had once been hubs of resistance were now ghost towns. But even in the darkest hours, the resistance was growing. Small pockets of survivors, scattered across the globe, were beginning to unite. And while they were still outmatched in terms of technology, the human spirit remained unbroken. Arya and her team had received word that a group of resistance fighters, calling themselves the Phoenix Coalition, had managed to capture an alien supply ship. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The Phoenix Coalition had learned the hard way that even a small victory could spark something bigger. They had begun spreading word of a growing human resistance, a signal to the rest of the world that humanity wasn't done fighting. Arya knew that if they were going to succeed, they needed to unite the resistance. The Phoenix Coalition was just the beginning. There were still many people scattered across the world, still clinging to life, but they had no idea where to go or how to fight back. And that's where Arya's plan came in. She knew that she couldn't do it alone. She needed to bring the survivors together. Hayes, Arya said one evening as the team gathered around the glowing console, "We need to send a message. We've got the tech to turn the tide, but we can't do it without help. It's time to rally the resistance." Hayes, who had been studying the alien communications on one of the old terminals, looked up. "You think we're ready for that? We don't have enough people or resources. We're still vulnerable here. The aliens will be looking for us." "I know," Arya replied, her voice steady. "But we don't have time to waste. If we sit here, we'll be trapped. We need to reach out. We have to believe there are still pockets of humanity out there, fighters who haven't given up. We can't afford to wait any longer." Leela, who had been working nearby, nodded. "She's right. The more we wait, the more chances the aliens get to destroy what's left of us. We need to strike while we have momentum." Arya could feel the weight of their words, the responsibility of leading them, of making the decisions that could change the course of the war, was overwhelming at times, but she couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. The team worked through the night, sending encrypted messages to various resistance groups across the globe. The technology they had found was their best chance, but they had to be careful. The aliens were watching every move they made. Any misstep could expose their location, and that was the last thing they needed. Arya sat at the console, her fingers flying over the keys as she sent out a final message to the resistance. "This is Captain Arya Collins. The Phoenix Coalition has uncovered a way to fight back. The key to turning the tide lies in our unity. We've discovered a weakness in the alien system, and with your help, we can exploit it. Stand with us, and together we'll rise against the invaders. Earth is still ours. We can still win." She hit send, the message flashing across the screen before disappearing into the network. It was out there now, waiting to reach those who needed it. The next step was waiting. She just hoped that the resistance groups would respond in time. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. But then, as if answering her call, the messages began to flood in. The resistance was ready. There were groups in South America, Africa, and Europe, all ready to take up arms and fight back against the aliens. The message had spread faster than Arya had anticipated, and the spark of rebellion was catching fire. It wasn't just about military power anymore. The fight had become something more, something human. People were no longer hiding. They were coming together, motivated by a single goal: survival. But more than that, they were fighting for their homes, for their families, for their future. They were fighting for the chance to see tomorrow. Arya looked over the messages, each one filled with promises of support, of fighters ready to join the cause. There were even a few from scientists and engineers offering their expertise, willing to help develop weapons or defensive systems. The resistance was growing, and with it, a new sense of purpose was emerging. The team gathered once more to discuss the next steps. "We need to prepare," Arya said. "We've got a window of opportunity, but we can't waste it. The alien forces won't stay passive for long. We'll need to coordinate with the other resistance groups and organize a strike." "We've got people on the ground in Europe," Hayes said, tapping a map on the table. "They're ready to attack the nearest alien supply depot. If we hit them hard enough, we can slow their progress and buy us some time. And we've got engineers ready to upgrade our weapons," Leela added. If we can match the aliens' tech with our own, we might be able to level the playing field. Arya nodded, feeling a flicker of hope in her chest. It wasn't much, but it was something. The first step toward taking back their world. But even as the Resistance prepared for its next move, Arya couldn't shake the feeling that the aliens were watching. They had been so methodical, so precise in their attacks, that Arya knew they wouldn't let humanity organize without a fight. They were learning, adapting. And that made them even more dangerous. Still, there was no turning back now. The Resistance was no longer a handful of scattered survivors. It was a force to be reckoned with, and together they would rise. Let's show them what humanity is capable of, Arya said, her voice filled with resolve. It's time to fight back. Earth is still ours. The day of the assault had arrived, and with it, the weight of everything that had led up to this moment. Arya stood on the edge of the old military base, looking out at the horizon, her mind running through the plan for what felt like the 100th time. The Resistance was ready. Fighters from all over the world had joined forces, and they were poised for the most daring strike humanity had ever attempted. The aliens, however, had not been idle. They had only grown stronger, more sophisticated, and now the time to fight back was upon them. There was no turning back. The coordinates they had acquired from the alien tech had led them to a key location, one of the aliens' largest supply hubs, hidden deep within what used to be the Amazon rainforest. It was heavily guarded, both by alien forces and their robotic sentinels. But it was also vulnerable. The hub was critical to the aliens' operations on Earth, and it was located in an area that the Resistance had learned to navigate. If they succeeded in taking it down, it would cripple the alien forces' ability to maintain their operations. For the first time in years, humanity had a real chance at victory. Arya's fingers drummed lightly on the console in front of her. The calm before the storm was always the hardest. Her team was ready, the other Resistance forces were in position, and the support from the engineers and scientists had provided them with new weapons and tech that could level the playing field. Yet, a part of her could not shake the fear that this might all be a trap. The aliens were clever, and if they had anticipated this move, they would be prepared. "We're going in hot," said Lieutenant Hayes, his voice steady but tense over the comms. "All teams are in position. We're ready when you are, Captain." Arya nodded, taking a deep breath. "Then it's time. Let's make this count. We fight for Earth." The operation was massive, involving thousands of soldiers from various resistance groups. Some were veterans, some were new recruits, and some were just civilians who had picked up weapons in the wake of the invasion. But what they all shared was the same drive: to reclaim their world. They knew the risks, but they also knew that staying hidden, staying passive, meant certain defeat. The aliens had taken so much already, and now it was time to take it back. The attack would be a two-pronged approach. One force would storm the facility from the ground, while another would provide aerial support. Arya's team, along with a group of Phoenix Coalition fighters, would lead the ground assault. They would infiltrate the alien facility and plant explosive charges at key points, while the aerial units would keep the alien reinforcements distracted, drawing attention away from the ground team. The first wave of resistance fighters moved in swiftly, using the cover of the dense jungle to conceal their advance. Arya's heart pounded in her chest as they pushed forward, her mind focused on the mission ahead. Every step could lead them closer to victory or death. They had trained for this, prepared for months, but the reality of the situation was far more intense than anything they had imagined. The sound of distant explosions echoed in the distance as the aerial units engaged the alien ships. The skies lit up with bursts of light, the clash of human weaponry against alien technology. It was chaos, but it was their chaos, and for the first time in years, it felt like they were in control. "Keep moving," Arya shouted to her team, her voice cutting through the noise. "We don't stop until we're inside." The team pushed forward, cutting through the thick underbrush. The sound of alien patrols could be heard in the distance, and Arya knew they had to be quick. The longer they waited, the more chances the aliens had to regroup and retaliate. They couldn't afford to lose the element of surprise. As they neared the perimeter of the alien facility, the first line of defense emerged. Alien drones, hovering silently above the trees, their red eyes scanning the ground below. The drones were fast and deadly, able to fire powerful energy blasts that could obliterate anything in their path. But Aria had a plan. She motioned to Surgeon Tren, who was ready with the EMP device they had scavenged from the alien tech. "Now," Aria commanded. Tren activated the device, sending out a pulse of electromagnetic energy that fried the drone systems. The drones dropped to the ground like dead insects, their once dangerous weapons now useless. But Aria knew this was just the beginning. They had neutralized the first wave, but there would be more. The team moved quickly through the breach, their weapons ready. They had reached the outer walls of the alien compound. The resistance fighters, working together in perfect harmony, breached the defenses with precision. They stormed the compound, taking out alien guards and robotic sentinels as they went. Each room they entered was filled with alien technology, advanced weaponry, power cores, and strange, glowing devices. But there was no time to study the technology. They had a mission to complete. Aria's team split up as they moved deeper into the facility. Their mission was clear: plant the explosive charges at critical points in the facility's infrastructure, then fall back and let the aerial forces finish the job. The alien forces had reinforced the compound's outer walls, but the heart of the facility, where the power cores were stored, was vulnerable. That was where they had to hit them. But just as they reached the central chamber, something unexpected happened. The ground shook violently, and a loud, deafening screech filled the air. Aria's heart skipped a beat as the doors to the chamber slid open. Standing before her was the largest alien she had ever seen, its form towering over the resistance soldiers, its body encased in thick armor that gleamed with an otherworldly light. It was unlike anything they had faced before. "Fall back," Aria shouted, but it was too late. The alien surged forward, its massive fists swinging. It moved with terrifying speed, its strength unmatched by anything the humans had seen. Aria barely managed to dodge its first attack, but her team was not so lucky. Several soldiers were knocked aside, their bodies crashing into the walls with sickening thuds. "Get up. Keep fighting," Aria yelled, her voice desperate. They couldn't afford to lose now, not when they were so close. The aliens' attacks were relentless, but the resistance was prepared. Leela, using one of the alien weapons they had found earlier, fired a powerful energy blast directly at the creature's exposed flank. The alien screeched, its armor glowing brightly as it absorbed the hit. But it wasn't enough to stop it. Aria's mind raced. They needed a way to bring it down. She scanned the room quickly and noticed a weak point on the creature's armor, a gap near its shoulder. Without hesitation, she grabbed a nearby explosive charge and hurled it toward the creature. The blast hit its mark, sending the alien stumbling back. The resistance fighters, fueled by the sight of their first real victory, surged forward with renewed energy. Together, they fought with everything they had. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, the creature fell to the ground with a deafening crash. "Move," Aria shouted, barely believing what had just happened. They couldn't waste any more time. The countdown for the explosives was ticking down, and they still had to get out. They planted the final charges, retreating quickly as the facility began to shake. The alien forces, though reeling from their first major defeat, were already regrouping. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The resistance had struck a decisive blow against the aliens, and though they still had many battles ahead of them, the humans had proven one thing: Earth was not lost. It was still theirs to fight for. The battle for Earth had begun. The explosion rocked the facility, sending a wave of heat and debris into the air. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The world held its breath, waiting. Then the shockwave of destruction rippled outward, cutting through the jungle and the alien forces that had occupied the area for so long. The resistance fighters, barely managing to escape the blast radius, had done it. They had struck a blow, a powerful blow, against the heart of the alien invaders. Arya was breathless as she sprinted through the dense undergrowth, leading her team away from the burning ruins. The earth trembled beneath their feet as they moved. The alien supply hub, the center of their operations in the region, was no more. Its destruction meant that the alien forces would be severely weakened, but it also meant that the war was far from over. Arya knew that this victory was just one part of a much larger battle. They had been lucky to escape the blast. The alien retaliation would be swift, and they had to move fast to avoid being caught in the crossfire. As they made their way back to the rendezvous point, Arya couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. The mission had been a success, but the real test was still ahead. The destruction of the supply hub had only delayed the aliens' plans. They would come back stronger, and humanity would need to be ready. The resistance was no longer a scattered group of survivors. It had grown into something bigger, a force united by a common purpose. The word of their victory had spread quickly, rallying even more survivors to their cause. The resistance fighters had learned to use the alien technology they had gathered, adapting it to their own needs. Weapons had been upgraded, and communication systems had been enhanced. The tide was turning, but humanity needed to hold its ground. Arya and her team reached the extraction point, where the rest of the resistance fighters were waiting. The air was thick with tension, but there was also something else: hope. For the first time in years, it felt like they were not just surviving, but actually winning. "We made it," Leela said, wiping sweat from her brow as she looked back at the distant plume of smoke rising from the wreckage. "But this is just the beginning, isn't it?" Arya nodded. "It is. The aliens won't give up that easily. They'll regroup, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next. This victory gives us a chance, but it's up to all of us to take it." The team piled into the transport vehicles, the urgency of the mission still weighing heavily on them. They had to get back to base, gather their forces, and plan the next step in the fight for Earth. But even as they raced through the jungle, Arya couldn't help but feel a flicker of optimism. Humanity had proven something important today. They were not weak. They were not helpless. They were capable of fighting back. As they returned to their headquarters, word of their victory spread like wildfire. Resistance groups from all corners of the world sent messages of support, congratulating them on their success and promising to join the fight. It was a turning point, a moment where humanity no longer saw itself as a victim, but as a force to be reckoned with. Arya and her team were greeted like heroes when they returned to the base. Soldiers cheered, and the air was filled with excitement and disbelief. They had actually done it. They had taken down an alien facility. It was an impossible task, but they had succeeded. For a brief moment, Arya allowed herself to savor the feeling. It was hard-earned, and it was a victory for every person who had fought, who had lost someone, who had dared to hope. But the celebrations were short-lived. They had to get to work. The destruction of the alien hub had crippled their supply lines, but the aliens would not stay down for long. Intelligence suggested that the invaders were already planning their retaliation. They would strike back, and it would be brutal. The key now was to keep the momentum going. Arya knew that humanity couldn't afford to relax. They had to be ready for whatever the aliens threw at them next. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning, strategizing, and rallying more resistance groups. The response from around the world had been overwhelming. People who had once thought the aliens were invincible were now preparing to fight back. Resistance movements, once small and disorganized, were now operating in unison. Every country had its own pockets of fighters, and those fighters were being brought together to form a united front. In the control room of their base, Arya and her officers pored over maps, satellite images, and intel reports. The aliens had retreated for now, but they wouldn't stay away forever. The key was to strike before they could regroup, to keep the pressure on them until they had nowhere left to go. "It's time," Hayes said, looking up from his screen. "We've got coordinates for another alien facility, this one even bigger than the last. If we take it down, we can cut off a large part of their reinforcements." Arya didn't hesitate. "Then let's move out. We take this fight to them." The strategy was bold, but it was their only option. They would hit the aliens where it hurt the most, by cutting off their supply lines and their reinforcements. But this time, it wouldn't just be a small group of resistance fighters. The entire world would be behind them. The enemy wouldn't be able to ignore the sheer size of humanity's resistance. As the forces prepared for the next strike, Arya stood in front of the map, feeling a sense of clarity wash over her. The battle was far from over, and many more sacrifices would be made. But one thing was certain: humanity wasn't going to go down without a fight. "Prepare for the next phase," she said, turning to her team. "The aliens have shown us what they can do. Now it's our turn to show them what we can do." The world was watching, and the resistance was ready. It wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about everything humanity had built. The homes, the families, the future. It was about proving that they would never surrender, that they would never give up on the world they loved. The next few days were a blur of activity, and before long, the resistance was marching on their next target. It was a larger facility, heavily guarded and fortified. But humanity was no longer intimidated. They had learned from the past, and with every victory, their confidence grew. The aliens may have had the technology, but humanity had something far stronger: their will to survive, to fight, and to win. When the final assault began, the resistance pushed forward with a strength and determination that surprised even themselves. The alien forces, though still formidable, found themselves overwhelmed. The humans were everywhere, fighting like never before, taking down enemy after enemy. It wasn't just technology that made them strong. It was their unity, their unbreakable spirit. The battle raged on, but by the time the dust settled, the aliens were on the retreat. Earth was no longer a conquered world. It was a world on the rise. Humanity had faced the impossible and had won. The victory was theirs. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a victory of the human spirit. A victory that proved that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how dark the odds, humanity would always rise. And so the fight for Earth continued. But now there was hope. There was belief. And with that belief, humanity knew that they could win. The world was theirs to rebuild.